just say it. Somebody should. Let's talk about tool time. Let's talk about bum wine, yeah. You're asking the questions that nobody could. Like where the bone thugs and are they in harmony?
Greener pastures. I don't know why I was like brighter pastures. That's the word. It's definitely not. All right. So if you're tuning in for the first time for some reason, this is part 3 where I'm catching everyone up on what Pete's been reading this year. And I'm in a sweater and I'm too hot. Hang on. It's like been cooler, but also humid as fuck. And my body is not a wonderland in those conditions. Okay. I read The Death of Superman 30th Anniversary Deluxe Edition. So this Death of Superman was a comic that I had when I was a kid, because, you know, it was a trade paperback I had. Because back in the day, I don't think people realize, like, today, if you're a comics reader, like, everything comes out in trade. Everything. Whereas back in the day, it was only, like, kind of a big event might come out in a trade paperback or a collection or what have you, right? It wasn't until later that comic book companies were like, you know, we could basically get a second shot at the second arrow at the apple sitting on this kid's head if we just slap 4 or 5 issues together and throw it on the shelf in that format. And, you know, what was good about the format for people like me, I'm a comics reader, I'm not a comics collector. And so it's much cheaper. And I think it was cheaper usually because, you know, it has no collector value, really. Trade paperbacks, even that's changed a little because the world is insane as far as, like, you know, what is a thing worth? Should we just hop over to eBay right now and just see, like, I'm trying to think of, you know, a comic or something that's, like, really not worth that much, but, you know, that someone might think is worth something. Let's see. Amazing Spider-Man 129. Is that first Punisher? Yeah. Okay, so for a CGC 3.0, which is not high, $900 for that issue, which is like, has to be an explosion, you know, because when I was just even like probably 5 to 10 years ago, I'm sure it wouldn't cost that much. But, you know, this is, here we are. It's insane. Like looking at all of the Amazing Spider-Man 129s, and there's a shitload of them. It's not like there's few of them on here. But yeah, and they're all over the place. And the prices on them are insane. Even a facsimile edition, someone's like, this will be, how about $4.25, 95 cents. I have a friend, and we used to go to these comic conventions. Now, back in the day, the comic cons we went to were in the Holiday Inn basement. They weren't like, they were not the comic cons you kids go to these days, right? And the one we went to all the time was basically, it was shit. I'll just say it was shit. And you would get there and it would just be the same people every time, you know, the same people selling. And there was this one guy who was always there, and he was there with his bastard kids, and you could tell what was going on. You could tell his kids were annoying the shit out of him. You know what I mean? Because he's just trying to do, it's kind of like take your kids to work day. Except imagine your workplace is a comic convention. So, you know, there's like some stuff for them to look at and like do. And so I can picture the conversation at home. Mom is like, oh, take the kids. You know, they like going with you. And then it's like, I have to like manage these kids all fucking day while I'm trying to make sales and whatever. Anyway, but he was never like a nice guy. And he sold my friend a pretty expensive comic that, you know, once we got it, he got it and he was like looking through it, he realized was a reprint and so was essentially worthless. And it's like always bothered my mind. I'm like, I wonder if he knew, the guy who sold it. I wonder if he knew that was a reprint. I think he probably did. Because my friend knew instantly, because as soon as he took it out of the plastic, he was like, oh shit. Because he could see the ads in it, and the ads were modern ads. And he was like, this can't be right. Anyway, so I had Death of Superman when I was a kid, because, you know, it was available in trade, and also it was like an event. It was a big comics event. You know, I think a lot of us talk about it as the comics bubble and the origin of it. At the same time, though, I'm like, I don't know, man, it was a pretty big deal. And it's not a bad story. Like, it's a very readable comic, the death and return of Superman. And I'll say leading up to the death of Superman, you know, it's upsetting to people who've never read a Superman comic that they're like, oh, they just killed Superman. But then having, in the last couple years, I've read a lot of Superman comics from the 80s and 90s. And I'm like, they had to do something. It was getting pretty fucking old. Probably the best part of Death of Superman Anniversary Edition, because this is a comic I've read many times, so whatever. But there's a magazine in it. Now, normally I don't like when there's a magazine in comics where it's like all text, because I don't know why, that just annoys me, because it, like, the speed of the reading decreases drastically. Also, sometimes they do like cute shit. Like, you know, they'll put a coffee stain on the page, right? Like Watchmen kind of did this stuff. And it makes it hard to read the text. And I'm like, well, I just want to read the fucking text. You know what I mean? Like, if you're going to march me through a magazine article, why you got to make it like at a weird askew angle and do all this cute stuff to it that makes it a little harder to read? Also, I'm like, look, if I had spilled Cheerios on a goddamn magazine, I wouldn't just read around them. I would brush them away. You know what I mean? I'm like, maybe this is for the future of comics, when it's like you can do like augmented reality shit and I can brush those Cheerios away. I can move the ashtray off the side of the corner of the page, John Constantine book. But like, until I could do that, don't do that shit. Or like do it, but then make it so that, you know, there's like a plain text version in the back. Put one of those little boxes that's like, if you just want to be able to read this shit, here's where you go. But anyway, there was a magazine, and there were two things in the magazine that I found stunning and awesome. One was there was just an ad for like Lex Luthor's airline. And it was like, once again, #1 in the skies over Metropolis, because Superman's fucking dead now. And I was like, woof, that ad goes fucking hard, and I kind of respect it. The other one was in the back in this magazine, they had a bunch of pieces that were written by some fake people and some real people. So like there were comic book universe people, and then there was like, I don't know, like a couple musicians and so on. And one of the people, the real people who wrote a piece for it was John Goodman. And they all were writing pieces as though Superman were real, you know, and he had died, and talking about his legacy. And they mostly sucked, you know, they mostly were just, the celebrity ones were especially bad. But John Goodman's, he's walking the streets in, I assume it's New York, maybe it's Metropolis, I don't know. And he comes across and he heard the news about Superman, and he's like upset. He comes across Mr. Mxyzptlk, who's like a, multi-dimensional imp, let's call him. And Mr. Mxyzptlk is working a hot dog cart and crying. And then John Goodman murders him by like shoving him in the hot dog water until he's dead. And, that's basically the story. And I was like, this is crazy. It's one of the things I've loved ever since I did Pete's exhaustive review of Model Land, which is something that is, when a piece of writing is so crazy, what I love about it is I'm like, well, I know that this guy wrote it. I know John Goodman wrote that, because if someone had ghostwritten that for him, there's no way they would have allowed it. You know what I mean? They would have been like, we're putting John Goodman's name on this, so quit fucking around. You know what I mean? You're fired. But if he actually does it, if he wants to go there and be that crazy, whatever, fuck it. So the next book was Superman Funeral for a Friend, which is kind of like, Superman, okay, so Superman's dead, but that doesn't mean they have to stop publishing Superman comics, right? And I did realize in Funeral for a Friend a big problem with like DC Comics and stuff and killing Superman. The problem was when you kill Superman, and like, okay, Batman's in his own book, right? Flash, Wonder Woman, all Green Lantern, Aquaman, they're in their own comics, and they're like not happy about Superman being dead, but those books aren't all about Superman being dead. The Superman books kind of are, but they're also like something has to happen. So we focus on the characters who are still alive, which are like not great characters. You know what I mean? They're pretty boring. There's this guy they were pushing at the time called Gangbuster. He had a dumb looking, it was like a football uniform outfit. And basically he was just a guy, and he had a symbol on his chest that was like, a fist with a like circle and a slash thing over the top, the no symbol, like the no smoking thing. I guess that meant no gangs or something. Anyway, it was very crazy and but boring. Not crazy in a good way where you're like, I can't believe what I'm reading. It was more like, I can't believe that, life is this long. Speaking of that, next is a book called Undead Unluck, a manga. So this is a manga about a guy who's undead. He's like a zombie, but he doesn't look fucked up. He looks normal. But whatever happens to him doesn't kill him. He just kind of, his body reforms and he's fine. And he's like tired of living this life. And he happens across our main character, who's a girl who has the worst luck in the world. If she's, especially if she gets close to somebody, then they always die in like spectacular fashion. Her parents died like in a freak accident of some kind. There's a part in the book where she basically causes a building to get destroyed by a meteorite. Is that what you call it when it hits the earth? Whatever. It gets Armageddon like crazy. So this guy who can't be killed decides like, I need to get to hook up with this lady because this is my best chance of getting killed. So, I mean, it's a very crazy premise because it's like he's trying to die, but he's very enthusiastic about it. So, I don't know. I kind of enjoyed it. It was fun. It's such a silly but good idea, I think. I read a few comics here that like I was like, oh, these are almost like a rom-com. And I do think maybe the future of the rom-com is going to be in some premises like this. You know what I mean? It's like, well, we got to do more than just like, she's a bank robber, he's a cop. You know what I mean? It's like, well, you can't just set up opposites and then be like, and then, they're in love despite that. And it's like, okay. I just, doesn't that kind of setup doesn't do much for me, because I'm like, I mean, who really cares about, a job? If I met a babe who I loved and had a job that was kind of like opposed to what I do, I would just be like, whatever. You know what I mean? I think I'd just be like, that's fine. We don't have to like and do all the same things. We could have a little bit of disagreement, right? Keeps it spicy. Maybe. All right. After that, we have Tenmaku Cinema. Basically, in this manga, a young filmmaker, like in high school, is haunted by a ghost who didn't realize he's dead at first and then did realize he's dead and was like, all right, the ghost is also a filmmaker, and the ghost is like, I need you to make this film for me that I was planning to make, but didn't get around to because I died. And so he's got this, and he's a famous like screenwriter who's made a bunch of great movies. And so, he's basically working through this kid to make these movies happen. This movie that he still has, I guess, in his brain, his undead, dead ghost brain. So anyway, the kid's kind of like doing everything as this guy's telling him to, but also adding some of his own things and so on. It's fun. It didn't blow my balls off or whatever, but it's fun. The next one is like prime for what I think is, that whole idea of rom-coms with actual stuff happening. It's called Dan to Dan. Dan, Dan, Dan to Dan, Dan to Dan, Dan. And it's a little X-Files-y. There's a young boy who believes in UFOs, but not in ghosts, and a girl who believes in ghosts and not UFOs. And so they kind of are at school and get into it, and they're like, well, the one's like, of course UFOs are fucking real, you dumb bitch. And the other one's like, fuck you, you piece of shit. Ghosts are real. Aliens are fake. I'm paraphrasing. So what they do is one night, the girl who doesn't believe in UFOs goes to a UFO hotspot, and the boy who doesn't believe in ghosts goes to a haunted hotspot. And both of them get attacked by their respective things they don't believe in. And they both gain some sort of weird curse/powers from it. And so then they kind of have to team up to try and relieve each other of each other's curses. It's a fun idea. And it's, again, I'm like, yeah, it's a little like X-Files-y, except if Scully didn't believe in aliens but did believe in ghosts. Which I was like, I think I actually like that a little better. It also would make more sense, right? You're like, if you were at the FBI and you're like, let's team these two up. And you're like, really? Why are we teaming up, this brilliant doctor with Scary Mulder? And they're like, because she's a woman, dummy. And it's like 1992. And I'm like, oh, right. I gotcha. And it's like, yeah, who is she fooling? She thinks she's fooling everyone coming in those oversized blazers. We all know what's going on under there. Gillian Anderson, whatever. But for me, it's a little more fun. And this is, to me, I think the future of the rom-com. A genre I don't care for and whatever. Next is Paranoid Gardens by Gerard Way. Yes, that Gerard Way of My Chemical Romance fame, who also wrote some comics like The Umbrella Academy, which I really liked. I thought Umbrella Academy was great. And some of his others I don't like as much. He definitely emulates this guy. Well, I don't know. I think Grant Morrison is the person I'm talking about. And I think Grant Morrison is a they, but emulates Grant Morrison quite a bit. And Grant Morrison is someone whose work I like a lot when it hits, and when it misses, it's like, I'm like, what did I just read? But not in a good way. Like, what did I just read? This makes me reevaluate what books are. More in like I don't understand what happened or why. Paranoid Gardens is about like an old folks home that's alive. And, it's kind of a sentient Danny the Living Street situation. And a bunch of like weird aliens and superheroes with dementia and crap like that live there. And, something starts happening so that the garden is being destroyed. So it gets a little too into that Grant Morrison-y territory for me, but it's still pretty good. And I will say this, like, I tend to very rarely read like a celebrity written comic because I usually find them to be okay to shitty. But Gerard Way is the real deal. I think he actually was working on comics before he was working on music. So, I think maybe sometimes I'm like, I wonder if that's where his real heart lies. You know what I mean? Because certainly he has money. He doesn't need to make comics. And comics would probably give him almost no money. So, it's probably more beneficial for DC Comics to have him write, the the Doom Patrol, than it is for him to write the Doom Patrol, financially. Next is a book called System Error. It's a cute little comic about a little robot who's wandering around seeming post-apocalyptic wasteland. I mean, yeah, it's a Wall-E knockoff, and I'm there for it. Anytime there's a robot, I'm into robots. I like them better than I like people. Take from that what you will. We have Superman, Reign of the Supermen, REIGN. Not like Superman's raining down from the sky, although that's kind of what it feels like. It's raining Superman. Hallelujah, it's Superman. You've got 4 Supermen Supersmen, who are all like taking the mantle of Superman because Superman's still dead. Or, they're, I don't know, a couple of them are claiming to be Superman. Whatever. It's fine. It's fine. It does have something in it that I think is funny. This is the introduction of the guy Steel, who you may know from the Shaquille O'Neal movie by the same name, where Steel was a character who came about because Superman was gone. And so he just built this kind of Iron Man suit, basically. I always think it's funny in these comics when some guy can just build an Iron Man suit and then he's flying around and shit. And I'm like, hold on. Like, if this guy could do this, if one guy could do it, how come there aren't more guys doing it? You know what I mean? Wouldn't you think once someone sort of breaks that barrier, how long is it before we're all tooling around in Iron Man suits? You know what I mean? Why would you not want to fly around in a suit? You know what I mean? The car would be dead in a week and we'd all just be shooting around in the sky. Be amazing. Next is Star Wars Darth Maul, Black, White, and Red Treasury Edition by Greg Pak. So this is some Star Wars comics. I don't know, every so often I'm just like, maybe I'll try a Star War. And then I read it and I'm like, Darth Maul, definitely the best looking character to least interesting character. You know what I mean? Like, if you're like putting together some kind of chart that compares to how cool looking versus how interesting they are, he's like the best looking to least interesting, right? And you'd have like, I don't know, Max Rebo on there, and you're like, I mean, he just looks like a fucking stupid elephant. But that's who Max Rebo is, right? That blue elephant. Yeah. He's just like a blue elephant guy. Costume looks like total shit. And you're just like, well, that's fine. But, he's not interesting, but he's like the worst looking. No one looks at that character in the background. And like Darth Maul takes his hood off and you're like, ooh, Max Rebo playing the keyboard with his fucking stupid elephant feet. And you're just like, yeah, okay. I think I've seen everything I need to see here. Next is a book called Fantastic Four, Volume 1, Imaginauts. This is just a Fantastic Four book. I don't know what to say about it. I think Fantastic Four, I'm going to get weirdly cosmic. It's appropriate for Fantastic Four. I think Fantastic Four is a weird book in that sometimes I think about like AI making stuff like podcasts or writing things or doing all the things that I do that I like. And sometimes I'm like, well, maybe that's the future. But then sometimes I also think, okay, I wonder if there's going to be a sort of point at which, like Star Wars. Let's talk about Star Wars. We're just there, right? At some point, will they have made enough Star Wars that they don't really need to make any more Star Wars? Because basically you could spend years plowing through all the Star Wars there is to plow through. And, you know, by the time you got through, even if you just watched the shows and the movies, by the time you got through all of that, you wouldn't even fucking remember the beginning of it. So you could start all over again. You could just continually cycle. And the other thing is, do you need to keep making new Star Wars if new people are being born all the time who've never seen Star Wars? Do you know what I'm saying? They can just watch it and to them it's new. Because when you're 5, literally everything is new. Maybe a different way to explain this is like, this thought came to me in regards to music, right? Because I've been listening to albums all the way through on Spotify. That's like my last couple years thing. And it's just shocking because you never really listen to everything. You know what I mean? Like I could do this for the rest of my life and there will still be a ton of shit, even if nobody made a single new album for the, you know, next 18 weeks to 20 whatever years of my life, whenever that decides to end. And so, you know, so I'm like, oh, maybe you don't need to maybe you don't need more albums, at least in terms of being able to sell albums or like keep record companies alive or whatever. The consumer doesn't really need more albums. And maybe we've already hit this point. It's a point where maybe creating things is the point of these new things, and it doesn't really concern the consumer anymore. You know, like working at a library, it's easy to have this thought, right? You would think it would be inspiring for a writer to work at a library, and it's totally the opposite. Because you walk through the stacks and you're just like, there's endless books here, and like most of these books, nobody will ever read. Or, you know, one person will have read and maybe forgotten. And, you know, I don't know. Anyway, I wonder about that with like Fantastic Four, because I'm like, I feel like there's enough Fantastic Four comics now. I could just read them straight through and it would take me like a decade. You know what I mean? Like, and how much more than that do you need? How much more comics need to be made? But then I'm like, well, I guess you need to make new comics because like, for example, the technology in a Fantastic Four issue from the 60s is going to seem stupid today, right? But maybe not. Maybe that doesn't matter. It's kind of like, and that discussion happens with movies too. It's like, well, the special effects don't look good. And I'm like, yeah, I don't really care about that. You know what I mean? It used to be interesting to me. Like you'd watch a movie and you'd be like, how the fuck did they do that? But you don't wonder that anymore because you're like, well, a computer. Like they just drew it on a computer. And it's like some look better than others for sure. But ultimately, I'm like, there's never a question in my mind of like, how did they achieve that? I'm like, well, probably a computer or some combination of computer and practical effects. You know, they thought about it for 10 minutes and did it. Anyway, there you go. Okay, I started reading The Savage Dragon. The Savage Dragon is a series that I read when I was younger. And I think what's interesting about Savage Dragon, it's still running, I believe. And it's the same artist and writer. It's one guy, Eric Larson. It's been the whole time. And it's like one of the few creator-owned properties that works that way. And it's kind of amazing. And it's like, I guess he's got a lot to say. I say as I'm doing episode fucking 500 whatever of this bullshit. Okay. I read a couple books that I'm going to combine. There are a couple kids books, Sharko and Hippo by Elliot Kalin, Sadie Mouse Wrecks the House by Elliot Kalin, and I also read Harley Quinn Destructive Comics by Elliot Kalin. So, you know, he's the one of the hosts of the podcast, The Flophouse. I said that backwards of how I meant to. The Flophouse podcast. The podcast Flophouse. Very funny. I think he's a good writer, and he did a series, Spider-Man and the X-Men, that I recommend. It was great. I mean, his kids' books are fine. I think they're fun. They'd be good story time books. So, you know, if you're listening to this and you're in that neighborhood, go for it. His Harley Quinn book, it's not for me. And I will say, like, for one thing, I don't really identify with that character. It's not that I don't identify with the character, because that doesn't really matter. It's more that I'm like, I just don't care. I'm not interested in that character. I just think it's like, I don't know, girl Joker with no powers who's like the Joker, but lesser. Not as crazy. You know what I mean? And you're like, yeah, okay. She runs around with a big hammer. I don't know. It's a little hard when you read comics to, like, you're reading this and you're like, well, I don't know. She's got a PhD or something. And you're like, so she can, like, make an attempt to fight Batman. How does that make any sense? In what world does that make any sense? You know what I mean? Two-Face. And it's like, he was an attorney and now, he's fist fighting Batman to a standstill. And you're like, oh, okay, sure. She's by far, she's not by far not the only one. What is happening in my brain today? She's not the only character or anywhere near the only character to have this, problem. But I'm just going to say it. I think she became popular because girls like to dress up as Harley Quinn at Comic-Cons. And it's a fun costume. I get it. And there's like a variety of ways to dress up as her. And, she was an earlier, like, legitimate female character that you could dress up as. And, I don't know, read or whatever. You know what the thing is? She's like Deadpool for me. Deadpool is a character that I'm like, on paper, I should love this. And I just never read any comics of Deadpool that I liked. And Harley Quinn's like in the same boat. I'm like, I don't know, on paper, this seems to work for me. Like, it's just crazy and you can make a lot of jokes and stuff. And I'm like, then I read it and I'm like, yeah, it's fine. It's just fine. Next is a manga called Tower Dungeon. Basically, some people try to go into a dungeon and rescue a princess. What's funny is they have to, so all these surrounding villages have to send like a tribute. They either have to send like goods or a person to like help try and get the princess out of the dungeon. So this nearby village is like, they're very nonchalant about it. And they're like, oh, just send this guy. He's pretty strong. And it turns out he is like super strong, but he doesn't actually know. He's just he like goes and they're like getting ready to go in the dungeon and he picks up like 2 giant barrels and he looks totally normal. He doesn't look like some huge guy. He just picks up these things that are meant to be carried by like 4 people and everyone's like, what? And he's like, what? So it's a little funny. The drawing style is interesting. I dug it. The next one is a series called Dobutsu Ningen, I think is how you pronounce it. I think it's Animal Farm is what that would translate to. Dobutsu something. Okay. This is about a guy and his daughter, and they're like out in the woods, and they get hunted down by some sort of humanoid animals and are killed and eaten by these animals. And then somehow weirdly resurrected. The dad is. And basically it's a reverse of human farming, right? Where it's humans are the livestock and animals are eating their flesh and, killing them and sometimes abusing them and so on and so forth. This would be PETA should get involved in publishing this in English. I don't think it's out in English. I've read an English translation online. I'm not like, I speak Nihongo ga, but it's one of those books that you're just like, it is fucked up that like, we kill animals to have something to eat. You know what I mean? It seems like we could be beyond that. I want to say, I feel like the only person on the planet who's like, bring on the lab-grown meat, baby. Because I'm like, I don't know, it's going to be pretty much the same, except an animal doesn't have to die for it. It's like, how are you going to justify murdering an animal that is definitely alive and has hopes and dreams of some kind versus eating something that was grown in a lab, especially if you can't even like tell the difference. You know what I mean? Which even if I can tell the difference, I think I'll still go for it. You know what I mean? Because I don't know. I'd be like, this is like 100% guilt free, right? Eating this is like fine. And eating an animal that was slaughtered is like, it's not my favorite thing. I don't know. You get older, it's like weird. I've been like weirdly charitable to like the spiders in our house, which is causing a mild amount of tension between me and Poon Master Flex. Cause she's like, when they're like in the bathroom, they have to die. And I was like, well, I can get we have a designated bug cup and a sheet of cardstock that goes over the top. So you put the bug cup on the wall and you slide the cardstock in and then the bug is trapped and you take it outside. And she's like, that's fine, but Spidey's in the bathroom die. And I was like, okay. And then I rescued one time, threw it outside. And since then, there's been like 2 or 3 babies in her bathroom. And she's like, see what you did? If you'd killed it. And I'm like, well, if I'd killed it, the babies probably would still be here. Because presumably, I have to assume the spider didn't like intentionally make its way into her bathroom and then after being thrown outside, return. I could be completely wrong about that. I've never like looked into this of like, do spiders know? Do spiders know where they are? This is going to be one of the dumbest things I've ever Googled. Do spiders know? Oh my God. Everybody says, do spiders know your daily routine? That's the thing they're looking at. Okay. And then, do spiders know they exist? This is giving me a treasure trove of things to look at. Okay. Do spiders know they exist? It's unlikely that spiders have a concept of self-awareness in the same ways that humans do. They lack cognitive capacity for self-reflection and abstract thought. Okay, that seems to make sense. Do spiders know humans' daily routine? Are spiders intellectually capable of that? No. But some species can learn and adapt to patterns over time. Do spiders approach people out of curiosity? Yes, jumping spiders are inquisitive and occasionally approach humans on their own. Wow. That's weird. Ugh. There's a picture of a hideous spider. It's something they're rather known and well liked for. Jumping spiders have extremely good eyesight and will watch you with curiosity. They are also all harmless and reluctant to bite. These traits make them pretty popular pets nowadays. Huh. Okay, do spiders know their owners? No, spiders do not know their owners. The way that I like this. Can pet spiders recognize their owners? First answer, no, it's a spider. It's an animal that runs on autopilot with no cognitive function at all. Okay, let me ask my dumb question. Do spiders know where they are? Spiders have a sense of their surroundings and location. Spiders, they follow environmental clues like airflow, humidity, and sun exposure. They have genes that predispose them to preferring locations where food hangs out. Okay. Interesting. Well, it seems to me that, Spidey doesn't really know where it is. So I guess it's possible, but, I always wonder, I'm like, how the fuck does a spider get, like in Poon Master Flex's bathroom, has no window. There's really, I guess it could be through the vent fan up above, but that would require them to get on the roof and then crawl down a pipe and you know what I mean? Like, and I'm like, I don't know. Like, it seems like a long way to go. And yet there seem to be a not insignificant number of spiders who end up in bathrooms. I don't understand it. Next, I read a book called Dungeon Crawler Carl. This is a book about a guy who kind of ends up trapped in a, dungeon crawler RPG, but real life. It's mostly funny and it's a little harrowing. It's a thing that happens in real life, quote unquote. And so, it has a thing that I think Harry Potter did really well, which is like Harry Potter has Harry Potter in it, and Harry Potter doesn't know shit about magic. So there's a built-in excuse for every character in the book to always be explaining things to Harry Potter. When he's like, what's a Horcrux? How does a wand work? You know what I mean? Like all this shit. And so because Carl is very similar to Harry Potter in that way, he's like, I don't understand this, or like, why did this happen? And so then someone will explain it to him. It's also got like a reality show Running Man aspect to it, which I'm not as hot on because I don't know. I'm just like, I don't care about social media clout as like, isn't it gross that we do this? And I'm like, yeah, it is. It sucks. I hate it. Anyway, that's me being overly negative though. I think Dungeon Crawler Carl is okay. I liked it okay, and I don't like this kind of book very much. So if you like that kind of thing, if you're like a tabletop RPG person, you'll probably like it, unless you're such a tabletop RPG person that you cannot abide things that you're like, oh, this is for fucking people. If you're like a Warhammer 40K guy who's spent 40K of Warhammers on statues and shit, maybe you won't like it because you're like, this is for beginners or whatever. This is for noobs. But for dabblers, dilettantes, I want to do a dilettante's ball. All right, next is Where Monsters Lie, Volume 2, Cul-de-sac, Cull-de-sac. This is part 2 of a comic series. The first part was basically about it's kind of like a little suburb in the forest, and it was all like insane killers who lived there, who obviously have like horror movie analogs. There's a sort of Jason / Michael Myers type guy. There's a Jigsaw guy, there's all these guys. There's like a holiday killer. There's a Freddy Krueger and so on. And so this is kind of the second part of that series. It's by Kyle Starks, who I think is great. And it's a fun series. I'm not like that into serial killers and stuff. I mean, sometimes, but like whenever I sit down to watch a documentary, because Poonmaster Flex watches a lot of documentaries, and sometimes, middle of the road for us is like a fucked up killer and here's what happened. And I'm like, yeah, okay. It's like a thing that's a 6 to a 7 for both of us. Cause she likes, true crime, but I don't know if she's so much into it for the grisly details, but, and I'm like, that's all I care about. But I don't know. I'm just not a true Crimenheimer so much, I guess. Next is DC versus Vampires World War V, which is a continuation of a series called DC versus Vampires, in which vampirism strikes the DC universe, and some of the characters are turned into vampires and some aren't, and they're fighting against them. This is a series that sounds so dumb and is so much better than it has any business being. I mean, it's really good. And it's like, I just picked it up on the off chance because I was like, this will be a lark. You know what I mean? It's probably going to be real fucking stupid. And it's not. It's actually great. And you're like, okay. Matthew Rosenberg, writer of this series, you know what? You won me over. It's one of the things that's funny about comics, and I think that I actually enjoy about being a comics reader and comics fan, is that, you talk about something like DC versus vampires. It's the exact thing that people imagine that I'm wasting my life reading. You know what I mean? Is like, what if Batman fought a real vampire? And I'm like, yeah, I am reading that. And it's awesome. It's so good. You probably hate it because, like, if you haven't really read any comics, you would have no affection for these characters and not care, but I love it. Next is Lester of the Lesser Gods by Eric Powell. Eric Powell is a guy that I fucking loved. The Goon is a book that he did, and it's kind of modeled after like old horror comics and stuff like that, at least visually. And then, you know, the stories are kind of, I don't know, noirish or something like that is probably how I would describe it. And I have a big place in my heart for the Goon. And Eric Powell is a great artist as well. Lester of the Lesser Gods, I wasn't feeling. It's like, what if a pathetic nerd entered the world went post-apocalyptic. It turns out this nerd is like the son of Zeus because Zeus banged his mom one time. I don't know. It's pretty one note, I guess. And it's like funny that he's wearing like bikini briefs and chaps and that's it. And, you know, he's like fancies himself a Conan, but he's kind of a loser. I don't know, man. It's just like, and that's it basically. There's not much else going on, and I think that's the problem is you're like, well, you can start there, but I don't think if you finish there, Pete's not going to be too happy. Next is One Piece by Eiichiro Oda or something. One Piece is like, you probably have seen characters from One Piece just, in the ether. This is like a famous series that is like, I don't know, 150 volumes at this point. So I read volume 1. It was pretty good. A kid wants to be a pirate and he decides to be a pirate. And he eats a thing he's not supposed to eat because he's a kid and he's dumb. And it gives him sort of weird superpowers of stretchy rubberiness. And mayhem ensues. It's pretty goofy. It's pretty lighthearted. It's pretty fun. It's a thing where I'm like, you know what? Like, I want to shit on this being 150 volumes or whatever. And I'm like, fuck it. It's pretty good. Pretty good. Next is Superman, The Return of Superman. So this is when he comes back to life. He returns, if you will. Couple funny things about this book. We're not going to get too into it. But one funny thing is that he comes back to life through, I don't know, weird machinations. It doesn't fucking matter. You know what I mean? I know you would think it would matter, but it doesn't. And everyone is very careful to explain that the mechanism by which he came back to life won't work again. So, try to not die again. And it's like you can hear in the story, and this comes up like 3 times in the book, and you could tell that their DC Comics is scrambling to be sure of telling everyone, like, listen, he can't just die and be resurrected every time, okay? So, just so you know, like, the stakes are still in place, even though he did die and come back to life. That's not what's always going to happen. I found that very funny because it's like you can read between the lines there, read out. The meta narrative is we have to make it clear to readers that, Superman can't just die over and over and be resurrected over and over. This is a one-time deal for reasons. The other funny thing is there's he comes back to life, but he's not like super powered yet. So there's a part where they're like storming some kind of facility, whatever. And he's got a bunch of machine guns and stuff. And you're like, oh yeah, this is a very 90s. People were like, what if we put Superman in a black suit and gave him machine guns and like, a bullet belt that goes around his thigh and, maybe ripped some holes in some stuff. And you're like, yeah, yep. That is exactly how they would do that at the time. That's exactly how they did it at the time. The next is a book called The Well by John Allen. It's about this lady who goes to work at like a tech company where things are not as they seem. It was interesting. It was okay. I don't know if it's totally for me, but it was doable. I have a weird thing about this book. Eventually, it kind of starts off, and it's very much like an indie, love story type of book where it's like, oh, characters. This character's kind of in love with this character, and this character's like, maybe I'm a lesbian or bi or something. I'm not sure. And this other character's like, I'm a lesbian, but I'm kind of tired of, people who are like, maybe I'm a lesbian, and then they're not. And then it turns into like a completely different story about completely different things, but you know what? I have an appreciation for the indiness of it, in that it's like, I think a mainstream comic would be like, this seems like two separate stories. And when you make your own book, it's like, oh, fuck it. This is one story. Next is Batman the Dark Knight Detective, Volume 4. So this is collecting some 80s or 90s Batman books. Great part in this book. Okay. You're Batman. And you end up having to fight this basically demon that was called up from hell or something. And you hit him with a wrecking ball, which you ride like Miley Cyrus right through him. And, he's like passed out on the ground in a construction site. You being Batman, and you're like, and someone's like, well, he'll dissipate, he'll disapparate, whatever you call that shit, in a little bit here. He's knocked out. He'll just vanish because he's a ghost or whatever. Do you, I don't know, maybe just park the wrecking ball on top of him or something? Do you crush him again? Or do you do what Batman did in this book and just kick him into a shallow ditch that's, unfilled with water, just a hole, basically? That's what Batman does. Basically rolls him over and into a hole, and he's like, that'll do. And then the monster basically stands up and isn't in the hole anymore, and it comes back and attacks him. And I was like, this is very different from the Batman I'm used to, who's like extremely thorough. If he was a writer of can I do this? If he wrote a book called Walden, he would be Henry David Thoreau. Hate myself. Next is a book called Strange Pictures by Uketsu, a Japanese writer, I guess, who I guess made a bunch of YouTube videos based on these sort of images and things and these little horror mysteries, and always appears masked and with their voice, using a voice changer in the videos. So weird. And the book is weird. It starts off very intriguing. It's like, here's a picture that someone drew, and here's sort of a psychoanalysis of the picture. Like, you can tell by the way this is drawn that something's going on here, and the way this is, something's going on here, and like all this stuff. And it turns into this like longer mystery based on all these different images. And I liked it. It was interesting because it walks you through the mystery. And I think some people would hate it because maybe they're like, oh, this just like walks you through step by step everything that happens. But I'm like, I don't know. I kind of enjoy it because it's like, I'm not trying to get ahead of the book and solve the mystery. But I'm also not waiting forever to get the mystery. I also liked, it's a mystery that's very focused on the mystery. There's not like a ton of, and then the detective went, and drank some booze in order to clear his mind or something. I went for a walk because that dame who came into my office made my head about as clear as a San Francisco Bay morning in the autumn, or whatever the fuck those kind of detective guys say, who wear those beige coats. Your Eddie Valiants. There's not a lot of that shit. It's like almost every bit of text is like pushing the narrative forward. And there's not a lot of like, then I had dinner, and it's like, okay, fuck off with that shit. So I liked that. I also read a book by the same author called Strange Houses, which is similar in vibe, but I didn't care for it as much because for me, it shits the bed in the last like 20 pages because it introduces a bunch of new people. And by introduces new people, I mean, says names and how they're related to each other, but there's no actual characters. And it just kind of like unravels the mystery in a similar way, but you almost have to like keep a family tree to understand what the fuck's going on in this book. And I have a complete inability to do that. So keep that in mind. You know, I'm telling you that I didn't like Strange Houses as much for that reason, but Strange Houses for me, it's like, you know, directly related to my inability to keep track of like characters when they're nothing but a name. And like, this is so-and-so's uncle. And I'm like, okay. And so anyway, I just kind of like let the book happen, but, you know, wasn't trying to keep track of what was going on anymore for the last like 15 pages. And it's like I sort of basically understood the ending, but I think it would have had a lot more impact if maybe there were like 15 characters instead of 30. Next is a manga called Blood on the Tracks, which is super interesting. It's really fucked up, but in a very sort of subtle way. It's about this mom and her son, and this mom, you know, she commits a shocking, violent act in the first volume. And in full view of her son's like witness to it and everything. And he's not saying anything about it. He's very confused. You know, he had no reason up till then to believe his mom was anything but normal, if just a little overprotective. And then as the series goes on, the things the mom's doing are more and more fucked up. Like she's trying to prevent her son from having like, you know, a cutesy little middle school love affair with a girl who passes him a note because she's like, you know, no, you just love mommy. You know what I mean? Weird shit like that. It gets really weird. It's pretty fucked up. And it's fucked up because like you look at the covers, if you Google the covers of this book, it's just so normal looking. Like I would never pick this up because I'd be like, oh God, this is going to be just some horse shit. And I'm like, oh my God, this is some fucking dark, fucked up shit. Anyway, I'm, you know, just maybe a third of the way into the series. I'm really enjoying it because it's really fucked up, and I have mixed feelings about telling other people about it because it's so fucked up that it's one of those books that you feel like if you recommend to people, they're going to be like, this is what he likes. I'm worried about him. Next is a book about Edward Muybridge by Guy Delisle, who does like autobiographical comics. Edward. I don't know how you say that guy's name. He's famous for inventing a lot of photography type shit for like stop motion. I guess he's most famous for pioneering some techniques that allowed him to photograph a horse running and proved that a horse's legs when it's running like kind of curl in instead of out. I'm not describing this well, but I guess, you know, this is like a thing. This is what I found very charming about this book is I'm like, back in the day, super rich people used to do shit like, I'm going to pay $1 million for this guy to photograph a horse running to prove that a horse runs the way I think a horse runs. God damn it. And it was like, oh, okay. You know, and like, you can always look at that and be like, he could be feeding the hungry or doing these other things. And I'm like, yeah, but we've gotten to a place in the world where I'm like, well, he's not actively harming anyone by doing this. So, you know what I mean? He's not trying to change the law so that horses are not allowed to run or something. He's just mildly altering things. It's fine. I read a book called Pine and Merrimack, also by Kyle Starks, which is fine. I have very little to say about it. You know, it's my boy Kyle Starks is almost all hits, very few misses. And yeah, I'll leave it at that. But the last one I'm going to talk about is also by him. Kyle Starks wrote a book called Marvel Unleashed. This is a book, a Marvel comic about some pets of Marvel characters who kind of team up. Basically, a dog is like, my owner's gone, I'm concerned, and finds another dog who then finds another dog, and they kind of form a little team. which then eventually includes like Falcon's hawk, which I can't remember his fucking name right now. Or Falcon's falcon, I guess. What the hell is Falcon's falcon named? He's got a name. No one cares about this but me, but I care deeply. Red Wing. God damn. Red Wing the falcon. There's a dog, basically, just a normal dog. There's the cat that Captain Marvel owns that's not really a cat. Throg, one of my favorites, who's the Throg of Thunder, because, you know, he got a little shard of Thor's hammer one time, and so now he's Thor, but he's a frog. And it's fucking great, you know, because you're like, this is so stupid. I love it. And another dog named D-Dog, who's like introduced in this. And there was a part that made me cry when I was reading this, because the dogs are all talking about one of the other dogs is missing an eye. And this one dog is like, don't worry, he'll be whole again when he goes over the Rainbow Bridge. And they're like, what's the Rainbow Bridge? And Throg is like, oh, you mean the road to Asgard? And they're like, no, this is like where pets go when they die. And D-Dog is unowned. And so is like, and they're like, when you die, you go to the Rainbow Bridge and then you're reunited with your human companions and all that. And D-Dog is like, what happens if you don't have human companions? And Red Wing, who's kind of a dick, is just like, I don't know. You probably just spend eternity alone. And D-Dog is like, oh, cool. So of course that's what happens. You know, D-Dog dies and is on the Rainbow Bridge alone. And you're like, what's going to happen now? I'm not going to tell you. But I was deeply emotionally affected by it. And I was like, first you're carrying spiders down the stairs in a goddamn cup. And now you're like crying over a made up dog who has only appeared, to my knowledge, in this book. So he was born to die. And you're like, D-Dog, no, you know. That's the unstable emotional state of the podcaster that you're listening to right now. You've made some bad choices. All right. That brings us to the end of the year. Or not the end of the year, but to today. That brings us to today. So we've talked about 128 books. Now, a lot of those were combined into one, because I was like, I'm not going to tell you about every fucking volume of Blood on the Tracks separately. I will just tell you about one once about Blood on the Tracks, and it's super fucked up. And then you don't have to know how many volumes of it I read and how much I enjoy it, and you know what a negative thing it is. All right, we'll see y'all next time.